Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today's date is January the 24th in the year of our Lord 2024. Fresh into the new year, fresh off of the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary. Now, even though there are two people who are still in the primary race, we can pretty much rest assured that we know, unless there's some, drastic, God-given change, that the former president, Donald J. Trump, will be the nominee for the next Republican nominee for the White House bid. Now, we are deciding our future more than ever. This is an election year, and we're deciding our future. We're deciding what kind of country we're going to be going forward. Now, if you listen to the right, the country needs saving. We're losing our country. The doomsday clock has sped up, and it's fast approaching doom and gloom for America. And nothing can be further from the truth. And nothing can be further from the truth. So, as Democratic voters, we have to look at, actually what's going on the ground. Where does the rubber meet the road with the economy? Really? I mean, really though, where does the rubber meet the road in terms of national security, foreign policy, energy policy in America, job security, good paying jobs, women's rights? Where does the rubber meet the road? And this is, should be what causes us to have a deciding factor on whether we're going to give President Joseph R. Biden another 4 years, or if we're going to sit on the sidelines and sit idly by and watch as America turns back the hands of time. I mean, we've never in history had, to our recollection here at Soluble, we could be wrong on this, and we haven't done research, but to our knowledge, we haven't had in the history of the country where a former president has lost a bid for a second term, came back around, and then won, another term after having someone replace him before he could get a second term. It sounds complicated, I know, but bear with me. But what we've never seen this before. The president has been twice impeached, multiple indictments, and he's still alive and well in the Republican Party. And I know that, like us here at Soluble, many of you, my fellow Americans, saw just the weak display. It's such a weak display of manhood, of manliness, as all the former contestants, gathered around the former president, as he began, these same old nauseating, tired, disgusting tactics and the name calling and all the, all of him in his presidential ambitions and having a lack of awareness of what being presidential really means, a lack of concern, a lack of care for what being presidential really means. So, this by itself, this weak display of manhood behind the former president, it should be, one of the many things that motivates and invigorates Democrats to get up and go to the polls. Now, this is life. This is life. But it's like we're about to see, life imitating art in the form of, something like a bad movie with a part two. The return of former President Trump, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, part two, the return of the Karens. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, Part 2. The alt-right strikes back. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, Part 2. With all his pals, welcome to the White House in the form of Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. This is, something that has the potential to be a Donald J. Trump presidency part 2. Usually when this is something like a Friday the 13th part 2 or a Scream 2 or something of that nature, it gets scarier. It may get a little bit more bloodier. And we've seen this. We've already seen this. The former president has so much blood on his hands from his own American citizens. The two young men on the commuter train in Oregon or Utah, one of those states there, who defended the women who were wearing hijabs on their head. Heather Heyer in Charlottesville. You had this mass shooting in New Mexico at the Walmart, just to name a few. Just to name a few. And so Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, Part 2. We've already seen it. And as I said, it could get messier and bloodier if we don't hold the line. And believe it or not, to my fellow Democrats, what's going to decide who is in the Oval Office after November of this year is going to largely hinge on the turnout of African-American voters. Now, as I've stated numerous times on this podcast, we have 3 major parties here, even though the independents have yet to put up a viable candidate that gains traction on the campaign trail to make, the vast majority of us turn away from the Democrats and say, although we voted Democrat for years and years and years, here is a good candidate from the independent party. And we're going to throw our lot in with the candidate. Because at this point in time in American history, the candidate had to be put above party. Let me say that once more. The quality of the candidate going forward into the future has to be put above party. And so while we have, supported the former president and wished him well, there's just no there with the potential to be president of the United States of America. There is little to no qualification there. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, Part 2. Look at my fragmented administration. We've seen it in Part 1. People were coming and going simply because the former president would not listen to reason. And, for whatever the reason is, that he has grabbed the Republican Party and made the party his own. If he's been sent forth by divine intervention, we have to ask ourselves as Democratic voters. I mean, Republican voters already have their minds made up. So we have to ask ourselves as Democratic voters, if this is divine intervention, is the former president sent forth to uplift the United States of America or tear down the United States of America? Now, as I said, you have 3 major parties here. And this 90 percentile has to get on board one way or another. Now, here's something that we're going to let you in on here at Soluble, which you may know or you may not know. But the fact of the matter is, right now in the year of our Lord 2024, that's 90-something plus percentile of African-American voters. African-American voters or African-American citizens in general But African American voters in particular, this 90-something percentile and African American population in general is right here now living the dream. Living the dream that a man came forward and presented to us and told us about so many years ago. And so you're here now. And the question is, what are you going to do? You have a 90-something plus percentile voting reputation, voting record with very little to show for it. Now, is that the Democratic Party's fault? Or could it be simply that you have a 90-something plus percentile of African Americans voting in a particular political party that doesn't know how to wield their power? It can only be one of the two. But as I've stated, I'll state it again. We're right here living the dream at this point in time in America. Now, is there work to be done? Of course. Of course. And we're going to break it down to you. The sticking points that, we feel like here at Soluble that we need to be dealing with being inside the Democratic Party umbrella. Because for a 90-something plus percentile voting percentage, you have very little to show for it. And the truth of the matter is, the hard truth of the matter is, it's no one's fault but your own. Now, we've did, podcasts here in the past, and we really have to pay attention to this going forward into this election and elections into the future. We can ill afford to have politicians of any stripe, but definitely of African American stripe, who will have a tendency to be bribed, to go corrupt, especially on the people. And we've experienced that. We've talked to people here on the ground in the great state of Florida, in the city of Jacksonville. We've talked to people here on the ground. And the record for, political correctness, if you will, political power to the people has been, very tarnished. It has been very much tarnished in this city where, we have political leaders of a preferential racial stripe that we think are going to benefit us in our neighborhoods and our communities and make our lives better. And, much to our chagrin, sometimes these political leaders have been on the take. They've been corrupt and they've fallen short of their sworn duty to uphold the office that they ran for and represent the people in a manner that they've campaigned on. These are the things that contribute to Negroes in America who throw 90 plus percentile of their voting power behind the Democratic Party. This is the major hurdle that you have to get over. And you have to be a voice for change. If you're an African American voter and you're leaning towards Joseph R. Biden come this November, and come this November, you go out in droves and vote, and then you think that your work is done, that's it. Nothing can be further from the truth. Nothing can be further from the truth. In this political process, in this political climate, after the vote is cast in November and we've won by a landslide in states, gained Senate seats, gained seats in the House, then the work has just begun. Then the work has just begun when it comes to carving out legislation, shaping policy. And so, with that being said, then it begs the question, can you go the distance? As an African American voter in this country, can you go the distance? This is your party. This is where you have seats at the table. Believe it or not, for African American voters in that 90-something plus percentile, this party is the lesser of two evils when it comes to these two political parties in America. Now you see Senator Scott here on the campaign trail with the former president. He ran for president. He talked about, how in mild terms, be it as it may, in mild terms, how the former president wouldn't be good for America going forward. Now, as we stated earlier at the beginning of the podcast, here you have Senator Scott standing behind the former president on the campaign trail. And, the former president is back up to his same tactics. He has the same old approach. And this is why, as Democrats, we must understand how important it is to defeat him again. We knocked him down. He got back up. It's our patriotic duty as country-loving, as country-first Americans to knock him down again. But you see Senator Scott, a member of the Republican Party. And, after the president engages in his same old tactics to try to get the senator to participate with him in smearing, taunting, or ridiculing Ambassador Haley, the senator proudly presses up to the mic and utters the words, "I just love you." Don't be mistaken. To this 90-something plus percentile, don't be mistaken. In the Webster's Dictionary, beside the word where you define token Negro, you're going to see Senator Scott's picture. This is tokenism like we've never seen before. Like we've never seen before. Here's a senator is in a party where his voice is based upon, whatever sheet of music that the extreme right of the Republican Party is singing. He doesn't have a voice of difference. He doesn't have a voice of difference. Look no further than the summer of 2020, when America was at a boiling point. A citizen in Minneapolis by the name of George Floyd had just been murdered by a police officer. And you see Senator Scott, when they talk about, shaping legislation that goes against police brutality. You see the senator trying to walk a fine line, a party line, and go with the party line. He can't step out on his own. Here's an issue that should be near and dear to the senator. An issue that should be near and dear. Because there's nothing for him to face the same harassment, the same crude, disrespectful treatment when being pulled over on a simple traffic stop. He could experience the same thing. But nevertheless, the senator is he has his head above water in a party that caters none whatsoever to his concerns. We've talked about the Iowa Minority Forum that was held right before the caucuses. And, we said it once, we're going to say it 1,000 times. No one showed up. This was before Governor DeSantis dropped out. Former President Trump was very much alive and well. Former Ambassador Haley was very much alive and well. And you have the Iowa Minority Forum to address concerns of Black and brown voters all across America. And you have not one Republican candidate show up. You have former Ambassador Haley saying that America's never been a racist country. Well, state your Indian name in the Republican Party. That's our position here at Soluble tonight. We're calling on former Ambassador Haley to back up what she's saying. We've had Barack Obama. We've had a president with an African name that no one can envision when his campaign started that he would one day soon be in the Oval Office. But it happened only in America. So here at Soluble tonight, we're challenging former Ambassador Haley. She states that the country is not racist and it's never been a racist country. Well, state your full Indian name on the campaign trail. Let it be known. Let it be known, you know, if you just by a stroke of some kind of divine luck make it into the Oval Office, you know, give us your full Indian name in a country that you say, by your own account, is not a racist country. Nothing. The Republican Party is, you know, is still a party of making statements without evidence to back them up, making accusations with little to no evidence to back them up. They've had the majority in the House since 2022. And they began to govern with that majority this time last year. From then to now, as Democrats here in America, as common sense independents, we're asking tonight here at Soluble for you to take a realistic look at what has gotten done. We're talking about, you know, an election that's going to decide our future for the next 4 years. There's competition out there. There are countries that are banking on America's downfall. Do Republican voters in this country care? Do they have any shred of concern as far as the former president being welcomed, being wanted, being hoped for to win an election by the likes of Russian President Putin, North Korean President Kim Jong? For freedom-loving, democratic-loving Americans, in realizing that there are so many people that are lined up at the southern border. We're not sure what's going on at the northern border, but people are wanting to get in. They're wanting to come to America like no other country on the face of this earth. Now, has it stopped since President Joseph R. Biden has been in the White House? Has it stopped? Has the will or the desire to become an American citizen diminished or dwindled in any kind of way in the last 4 years since President Joseph R. Biden has been in office? This tells you a lot about this country and what it has the potential to be. It is the envy of the world. And you have a former president who is, by all leading indicators, the next man up once again for president of the United States representing the Republican Party, who's caused democracy to take a serious blow. He's caused a serious hit, fracture, if you will, a crack in this foundational wall that we call democracy. We see what happened on shortly around the time of the election of 2020. When the former president came forward and said the election was rigged, it was stolen, we see what happened in Myanmar. Here was a country that was slowly but surely working its way towards democratic freedoms for its country and all of its citizens. And what did the former president do with his actions around the election of 2020? He gave the extremists in Myanmar the grand opportunity, the grand opening, the greatest excuse in the world to go back and overthrow the government by force based on his actions. We see it in Brazil. We've seen it happening in Brazil. So the fact that we are a freedom-loving country that people all around the world have a desire to be a part of. And to see the former president begin to set the democratic norms or democracies, young democracies, up and coming democracies, to see the former president set those back around the world, it should tell us as voters just how much out of touch the former president is with the way our system works. It should tell us just how out of touch the former president is with the way our system works. Now, at the end of the day, Soluble has come forth in an attempt to try to lead the country and our political office holders and those who would aspire to be future office holders a solution. A solution, to be able to work across the aisles. Now, since the ouster of former Speaker McCarthy, we see some semblances of it. The Freedom Caucus is still at the far right. They're angry. They're constantly bitter. They are that wing of the party that makes up the majority of the fact that it's the party of no. The Freedom Caucus wing of the Republican Party. But we see semblances of cooperation, of them working across the aisles with Democrats to get things done. The President of the United States of America is, actively engaging as we speak with his officials and his administration in working out a deal for the southern border, which we desperately need. President Biden knows that. But what you may or may not know as voters, if you're not paying attention and you're not noticing what's going on behind the scenes, he's offering a lot that will go a long ways in solving the border crisis. Is this a one fix? Give me one thing and it was totally solve the problem? No, it's not that. But the president is working diligently to give our Border Patrol at the southern border the things that they need, trying to, bring these proposals that will go a long ways in stemming the flow of illegal immigration at the southern border. He's bringing these things to the Republican Party. And oftentimes what we have in an election year where we've come to a point of such bitterness now where, the Republican Party doesn't want to cooperate too much. Now they're screaming, the southern border, it's out of control. Joe Biden is, he's letting them all in. The southern border is being overran and the president is looking the other way because, it's part of the Great Replacement. He's bringing in illegal Hispanics so that they can vote for him and keep him in office. Nothing can be further than the truth. Nothing can be further from the truth. And what we have had a tendency to do in the past is, listen to these Republican talking points and, eat it up, hook, line, and sinker. It's only something to distract. It's only something to distract. Because what we have is a party that is very much for controlling the flow of immigration at the southern border. But in the years that they've been in charge, since 2022 midterms, what legislation have they brought to the floor for a vote? We hear the complaints. We hear the accusations against President Biden on what he's not doing. But at the same time, if we're talking about what President Biden is not doing to help control the flow of illegal immigration at the southern border, at the same time, shouldn't we be hearing from the Republicans what they plan to do? Shouldn't we be hearing the bright ideas that they do have? to control the flow of illegal immigration at the southern border, we should hear it. But what we hear is nothing. In their own words, the southern border is being overrun. But they're busy going after Hunter. They're busy trying to form a Biden crime family. They're actually trying to make this up. They're putting in pieces. They don't fit, they take it out, and they put in another piece. Trying to show, to put together a picture of what the Biden crime family looks like to the American people. Now, we have yet to see it. We have yet to see this complete picture. Can they walk and chew gum at the same time? We're not saying don't investigate if you have something there. But can this party investigate the president and his son, and at the same time bring forth common sense legislation or things that shape policy towards controlling the flow of illegal immigration at the southern border? The ball is in their court. They have the majority in the House. They have the power to bring forth real solutions that will stem the tide, will control the flow, and make the southern border more safer, and have people coming across seeking asylum in a more orderly fashion. So it's the same old, because they're counting on you, the American Democratic voter and common sense independent voter, to just listen to what they say. Don't fact find on your own. Don't check, beyond what you're being told. This is what the Republican Party is counting on. Here's the bottom line when it comes to the fact of the matter. The Republican Party doesn't have the numbers right now to win an election, to win in the general election. They don't want Trump, but at the same time, they don't have the courage to stand up to the former president. They don't have the courage to fragment the party if necessary for the sake of country. And this is what we're talking about when it comes to deciding our future. If we had someone as unqualified, as unpresidential in the Democratic Party as we see from our colleagues across the aisle, we should be in an uproar as Democrats. We should be in an uproar. But we don't. We don't have that. Former President Trump knows that, he looks at both parties. If he despised former President Obama, if he didn't like the fact that, he was the first African-American president in the United States of America's history, he could have still ran as a Democrat and succeeded in. But the former president knows that his methods, his tactics, his policy, his presidential mannerisms would never float in the Democratic Party, and rightfully so. So in deciding our future, one should look no further than the fact that our Republican colleagues have put forth a candidate once again that is a clear and present danger to the republic and democracy as we know it. A clear and present danger. On one of the many simple facts that he's just not qualified. He doesn't have a clue. The COVID-19 virus was able to take hold and have a serious effect on American life because the former president was unqualified. What was the shape of the former president's administration going into the year 2020? What was the shape of his administration? What panel of experts did he have on call to help deal with such a thing as the coronavirus? He had Dr. Anthony Fauci, a dedicated and loyal surgeon, doctor, problem solving for epidemics, sicknesses, diseases, in America for the last 30, 40 years before coronavirus even took hold. And what did the former president do? Tried in every way to denounce him, belittle him, push him aside for voodoo witch doctors who would say anything that the former president asked them to say. And so, we're deciding our future here. Iowa's in the bag. New Hampshire is in the bag. And former President Trump has came out victorious in both states. In both states. Now, as Democratic voters, and especially as American citizens, we have to ask ourselves, are we really in that bad shape as a country? The former president was in office from 2016 to 2020. And since then, it's been President Joseph R. Biden. Where has America gone? But up. We've moved on from a pandemic that was very crippling to the nation. Now, keep in mind, people are still getting sick and dying from the coronavirus. President Biden is aware of that. He's on top of it. Now, to that 90-something percentile of African-American voters, I appeal to you because the president can do only so much with a slim majority in the Senate and no majority in the House. And you're the missing link. This 90-something plus percentile of African-American voters, you're the missing link that is either going to give President Biden another 4 years, or we're going to turn the hands of time back to a time of total darkness in America. Our Republican colleagues on the right realize it. The never Trumpers, they know it. They want anybody but Trump. And they're either going to vote for President Biden or Big Bird, President Biden or Mickey Mouse. You've never seen this. Where have you seen it before? Where you have a legitimate Republican candidate and you have 1/3 to 1/4 of Republican voters not voting for him. This should tell us, to my fellow Democrats, how much we must get on the ball. Now, we have to keep in mind also, in deciding our future, the Supreme Court is definitely on the ballot for 2024. Now, we know that the former president has seated 3 Supreme Court justices who all stated that Roe versus Wade was precedent. Who all stated that Roe versus Wade was precedent. And where do we sit now? Where has a woman's right to choose? Has a woman's right to decide her own fate when it comes to her medical issues? Has it improved? Has it advanced? Or has it taken a standstill with these Supreme Court actions? So the Supreme Court is definitely on the ballot come November 2024 of this year. Now, someone is waiting. Someone is waiting. It could be Justice Thomas. It could be, his name escapes me right now. He came before Gorsuch, but somebody on this Supreme Court body wants to retire, wants to resign. And if the former president regains the Oval Office, you know, whether it be former Justice Thomas or some of these Supreme Court justices who sit on the bench, who tilt the court to the right, you know, they're going to be glad to resign because there's nothing like being on the Supreme Court and having a prime opportunity to resign and have another Supreme Court justice take your seat with the same judiciary ideologue take your place. There's nothing like that. None of these justices want to resign and have their seat taken by the opposite party. So if there's a conservative justice on the Supreme Court who's contemplating stepping down, he doesn't want to be replaced with what he perceives to be a liberal Supreme Court justice, taking his place on the bench. So, that's something that we definitely need to keep in mind. And, it would be even further, altogether new low than where we're already at if the former president regains the Oval Office and he's able to put a fourth Supreme Court justice on the bench. If you think that we're in, not such a good place now with the Supreme Court, it can only get worse. You look at the situation in the Middle East with Israel and the Palestinians, it can only get worse. Because the former president has no balance. His moral compass spins. And I must admit that here at Soluble, we're astonished that there's no one other than Governor Christie, too little, too late. But there's not more than one person, or there's not someone besides Governor Christie, or someone along with former Governor Christie who pushes back against this weak excuse of a president. And, what we notice here at Soluble, exactly what makes these former presidential contestants so weak. They stand in the background and brace themselves. You're seeing them tense up for the terrible soundbite that's coming next. For the very much unpresidential soundbite that's coming next. And so, this is where we're at, ladies and gentlemen, in deciding our future. A Donald J. Trump presidency, part 2. Chaos reigns. Chaos rules the day. We've never seen anything like it, and we have, our foreign allies, they're scratching their heads. Remember this. Remember this from the last time, there was such thing as a Trump administration. You had our foreign allies around the world scratching their heads saying, what's going on in America? What's happening in the country that we thought that we knew? Because we elected such a person. Now, we have to understand, Democrats, that the embarrassment is ours to share if we allow this to happen again by sitting on the sidelines. Now, one thing that I'm hearing constantly in African-American circles, close around me, I don't know if it's, across the nation or what, but one of the things that I'm hearing is that, in African-American circles is, one of the things that African Americans are seeing as a benefit, from a Donald J. Trump presidency is that, the former president was giving out the money. And, we have a long ways to go in knowing the whys of it all. Why? would the former president put forth money to average everyday Americans? You know, we were going into the middle of a pandemic. You know, writing out a check for people who were laid off from work, who couldn't go to work because we couldn't gather indoors. You know, for fear of mass contamination. Um, you know, it was something that was new, and we didn't know, you know, the true source of it. We hadn't got our arms around how to deal with the coronavirus pandemic at the time. But what we must stress here is soluble to those African American voters, that, you know, the one thing that they look upon former President Trump in a favorable way is because he gave out the money. It's nothing that any other president wouldn't have done. Any president who was in office at that time, whether he would have been of the Democratic or Republican stripe, would have gave out those checks in an attempt to soften the landing for everyday Americans who could not go to work because we were in the middle of a pandemic. Any other president that was in office, you know, would have done the same thing. Yeah, and you have to realize is that, you know, when President Biden came into office, he put out even more money, so much so that the Republicans cried foul and said that, you know, what he was doing was, you know, he was putting out so much money that it was going to cause inflation. So if your premise or your argument or your reason for going with, you know, a favorability towards voting for former President Donald J. Trump is because he was giving out the money, you need to really do some fact finding. You need to really need to do some research on what was actually happening from the Trump presidency end to the Biden presidency's beginning. If you want to base, you know, your favorability towards voting on one or the other for president of the United States, both were doing it. And one of the things that was hurting, you know, the economy other than the pandemic at the time was that former President Trump was giving money to people who didn't really need it, who were already wealthy and well off. So much so that they were sending the checks back, thereby keeping the dollar strong, correcting a wrong that the former president was doing. And, you know, he didn't know any better. He didn't know any better. Look no further than the Trump organization. It's on shaky ground right now. You know, we right now it's in the courts where they're trying to figure out, you know, what's he worth? Is his tax filings fraudulent, or are they correct? You know, is one of his properties in particular, you know, 100,000 square feet, or is it actually more like 70,000 square feet? The Trump organization is in disarray right now. So the president knows, you know, little to nothing about as far as dealing with money, managing money, and growing money. Is he as rich as he makes himself out to be? Is he as rich as he makes himself out to be? So, you know, there's a lot of fact finding to be had, or to be done, if you will, as far as those African American voters here in America who is, you know, pinning their hopes on an assumption that the former president will be good for them because he'll give up the money. We're no longer in a pandemic. We're no longer in a pandemic. And, you know, the truth of the matter is the former president is clueless. He's clueless as to, you know, what it takes to run a democracy, to keep it strong, and work towards making it stronger while he's in office? Do you make democracy strong in deciding our future? And, who is going to lead us for the next 4 years, beginning in November or beginning in January of 2025? Does the former president make us stronger by smoozing up to foreign dictators like Kim Jong or Vladimir Putin? Does the former president make us stronger as a democracy, as a republic, by going against his own intelligence agencies and what they have assessed when it comes to world affairs, where the threats may be, and where our friends and allies may be? Do we get stronger and advance ourselves as a country by deciding on a future where we have a president who doesn't even really read his intelligence reports, has zero to no interest in daily intelligence briefings? We're deciding our future here. We had a former president who's vying to be the commander in chief once again. And you see so many things that are happening on the right with the Republican Party. That's out of the norm. Now, the former president's extremes, the things that he says, the way he conducts himself as a wannabe president. Why is this accepted? And we have to remind ourselves as Democrats that the country is not in that bad of shape. That it calls for that these times calls for a president to be brought into the Oval Office as extreme as the former president. As extreme as the former president. So we have until November. Pay attention to what's going on. We see the Republicans talking about the deep state. Where is the evidence of it? Who is the head of it? How can they give us all of this without any proof or evidence to back it up? Where is the deep state? Who runs it? Who is the head of it? They can give us nothing. They'll throw out accusations. They'll make statements, accusatory statements, with little to no evidence to back it up. And this is one of the ways that we have succeeded as a democracy, as a republic for all of these years, in having a system of checks and balances where, we rely on the evidence, not what someone is telling us. We don't rely on looking in the direction that the finger is pointing. We rely on the evidence. And because that's the way we have done it since the beginning, that is what's made the country a great America. You don't make America great again by destroying evidence or by burying evidence or by leading us for the next 4 years with alternative facts. The former president is taking in money from foreign agents, from foreign governments, from the Chinese. Why hasn't he disclosed it? We're deciding our future here. And in deciding that future, we have to understand that if we sit by on the sidelines, we can very much allow a former president to regain the Oval Office who cares more about his own bottom line for himself and his family than he does about the country, the United States of America. And his Republican colleagues, whether they're office holders or voters, have little to no regard for this. They don't see it as a threat. They don't see it as, something that can weaken democracy. And in deciding our future, this is what we have the potential to be again. We run the risk of putting the former president back in office again, and he's tried at every turn to undermine the system. He has no respect for a system of checks and balances. He's looking for a way to go around it. He's looking for a way to delegitimize it, to make it seem as if it's something that is rigged or that is not legitimate. And it's coming after him only because he is who he is. You hear the classic line that his supporters suck up every time he says it. And that line is, they're coming after me because I won't let them get to you. They're coming after me because I won't let them get to you. Okay, they're coming after you. Who is they? Because I won't let them get to you. Who is them? You would think that if the president, cares about the people that he will be leading, about the citizens in America that he will be governing over, you would think that he would identify these theys or these thems that are coming after us or that are coming after him because he won't let them get to us. He can't identify them. And you would think that, we have a deep state lurking. We have a deep state lurking, a shadow government, and they're coming after us based on what the former president is telling us, that he should name names. Tell us who these people are. Because the threat is so great, coming from the former president's mouth and coming from Republican talking circles, they should name names. But there's nothing. There's nothing. We can't put one name to one identifiable person. Not one. So, this is only to dupe you. You have to understand that the former president has stated on the record that he loves the poorly educated. And so, with these type of dangerous talking points, this propaganda, these false accusations, we can understand why the former president loves the poorly educated. Because it seems as if, they will believe anything that comes out of the former president's mouth. So in closing, when it comes to deciding our future and how America's going to look for the next 4 years, this is not, the best that the Republican Party has to offer, but it has become a party of spineless men. They're afraid to challenge the former president. And, we have to take a long look at this, to ask ourselves, how much do Republicans really love this country when they're afraid to challenge or step up to a threat within their own party, a threat towards democracy and a threat towards the country? If Reagan was alive today, would he give this president his stamp of approval? If Dr. Martin Luther King were alive today, whose birthday we just celebrated a couple of weeks ago, would he give the former president his stamp of approval? And if you can find a majority yes in those questions, then the former president is your guy. But if not, then, the Republican Party has some serious soul searching to do. Because they have decided thus far that the former president is the best thing that they have to offer to us as a country. They say, here's a guy who is going to lead us into the next 4 years of prosperity, security here at home, domestic tranquility. Here's the guy. But our position here at Soluble is that, it will be anything but. Now, the discussion goes on, the debate continues, and we're here, you know, to solve gridlock, to bring the two parties back to working together again. And so, in deciding our future, the best thing that we can do concerning America right now is to re-elect Joseph R. Biden in deciding our future. Unless we want to revisit a past where we had a president who was only approved for 4 years. So unless you're tired, unless you're ready to sit on the sidelines, unless you're ready to let the Republican mainstream convince you or talk you into thinking that the president that we have now is not qualified for the job, is not up to the task. Nothing can be further than the truth. We have a system of checks and balances. The president is in his early 80s. But guess what? We have a president, a vice president to back him up. She's one heartbeat away from the Oval Office. And the truth of the matter is, this is the problem. So we'll continue to make the case as to why America is best under another 4 years of Democratic leadership in the Oval Office. And we'll listen to our colleagues on the right, and if they come up with a better argument or what they think is a better man, then we're all ears, we're all eyes and ears. But as far as the leading candidate right now that will be vying for the Oval Office in Republican circles, we just don't see it. We've had it for 4 years, and even though he's running for another 4, based on what he's telling us on the campaign trail, based on what he's saying when he's up at the podium at his campaign rallies, nothing has changed. So if nothing has changed, then we as Democrats, in deciding our future, we must send him once again back to Mar-a-Lago, beginning on November the 5th, 6th, or whatever the day after the election is. We must do our due diligence to send him back to Mar-a-Lago, because nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. It's the same old style. It's the same old, unpresidential candor, the unpresidential composure that he possesses. And this is all he knows. This is all he knows. The former president has found a way to win the hearts and minds of Republican voters by playing the race card with immigration, with making America great again, and using dog whistles. And, he has a lockstep grip, iron grip on the Republican Party. And we must do everything in our power in deciding our future to, as I said, send him back to Mar-a-Lago beginning in November. We'll pay attention to what's going on the campaign trail. May the best person win in this Republican presidential primary. We don't see Ambassador Haley going the distance. And so what we're doing here at Soluble is preparing you to be ready for a contest between President Joseph R. Biden and a rehashed, but the same old former President Donald J. Trump. So we thank you for joining us tonight here at Soluble. It's always a pleasure for us to bring you the political happenings in a way where we are trying to bridge a gap. We're trying to close this breach of partisanship, of brinksmanship. And so there's nothing like a good, healthy, and hearty debate in America in deciding, where we're best headed as a nation for the next 4 years. And it's the thing that makes America great, because all voices can be included. So to that 90-something plus percentile of African-American voters, keep the faith. We're going to bring you the facts. We're going to lay it all out on the table for you. And, at the end of the day, you will have to decide. But know for a surety, in deciding our future, that former President Donald J. Trump is not the answer for America to go forward, to ever be as great as it has the potential to be. and that's a talking point. So until the next time, this is Soluble signing out. We thank you for joining us tonight on this January winter night. And until the next time, stay up, stay alert, and stay aware of what's going on in political circles. Until we meet again, this is Soluble signing off. Good night and God bless. Thank you.